Hey guys, welcome back to another podcast of the Game Time Discussions podcast. I'm sitting here with Cameron Selby, and today we're going to talk about all the moving parts that happened in free agency these last couple of days. We've seen more fantasy impacts probably than I've seen in a long time when it comes to the running back position in free agency. So let's just hop into it. We're going to go position by position and just kind of talk about each position that's been impacted and how they're going to help improve each team.
Yeah, and keep in mind this is just the end of day 2. So we literally had news I was walking in to record that happened that we had to add to the slides for this discussion. So obviously it's a lot of moving parts. We're gonna have our phones right here just in case something big happens. Get some instant reaction. That'd be pretty fun. So, but we're gonna start off with the quarterback position. Just kind of gloss over all the moves that took place. Obviously, you see 9 on the board. We started off Mac Jones. After 3 years, traded for a 6th to be a backup, not really compete for the starting job.
But the best part about it is he's the backup to Trevor Lawrence, who is, when we had that draft, like we were talking about Mac Jones going 3 possibly. This is San Francisco's guy. And then he comes out and he's the, best quarterback his rookie year compared to the rest of them. And our friends are telling us that they'd rather have Mac Jones over Trevor Lawrence. And well, there you go. Now he's the backup. So, I just wanted we just add him in there just to kind of talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy that was the 2021 draft, and we're in 2024, 3 years later. 4 of the 5 first-round quarterbacks is assuming that Justin Fields ends up moving on,
right?
Like we think. 4 of them will not be with their original team, and Trevor Lawrence, the one that remains, has not necessarily lived up to the expectations thus far.
Right.
I still believe he can, but he has had a lot of ups and downs. Obviously, going to Jacksonville didn't help, but it's just been a complete colossal failure from the expectation originally when we first saw this draft come into play.
Yeah. So let's get off of the jokes. But for the next 3 guys, they're the ones that made the big paydays. They're considered the franchise-ish quarterbacks of the group. Russ didn't really make a payday this way. He made a payday by stealing the Broncos' money and running away, basically.
Yep.
So he's on this list. He's going to the Pittsburgh Steelers for the minimum at $1.2 million for this year. Kind of talk to me if you think he's going to improve them.
Well, I think it remains to be seen. Based on the struggles of Kenny Pickett, I don't think that there's a lot of people out there that think that he will be the starter day 1, but I am not exactly sure yet. Based on it being a minimum deal, that doesn't give any kind of security that he has the job whatsoever. And before Russell Wilson, the steam picked back up, we mentioned in a previous podcast that Russell was one of the favorites to go to Pittsburgh, and then it cooled off with the indication that, hey, we think we want to give Kenny one more shot. And then all of a sudden, at midnight, Russell Wilson is the first move of free agency to Pittsburgh. Makes sense. It's probably the most open position for competition of any NFL team that isn't already looking at a rookie quarterback this year. But, I just don't know. I can't give him the range yet. So it remains to be seen. I think he would be an upgrade just because he would actually be productive. But we'll just kind of see where we go. It's new, more conservative approach, but it takes care of the football moves that change with Arthur Smith at the helm now. So I don't think there will be as much discombobulation that they've dealt with the young quarterbacks and stuff. So, but also the big splash that I want to talk about is Kirk Cousins, longtime Minnesota Viking, former Washington Redskin, cashes in his last big deal of 4 years, 180, coming off an Achilles to Atlanta. We talked about him as somebody that we were kind of assuming in our first mock edition that we'd have a hunch that he'd stay.
Right.
And then it kind of started to seem like Atlanta was prioritizing him over like a deal for Justin Fields. And then all of a sudden, they kind of cash in on that.
Yeah,
so,
of course.
Very, very pricey. It's really a 2-year guaranteed deal after that, it's kind of there's a lot of void and easy ways to get out, depending on if he doesn't age well.
Right, of
But
course.
he's. I think what they needed a grown up in the room, and they've got so many good skilled players and positions. And with a first year offense coordinator Zach Robinson calling plays now, you just need somebody that's been there that can do things and
right. Well,
yeah,
he's just gonna take care of the ball and move the ball down the field. That's they bring in Darnell Mooney, which we'll talk about in a minute. They just they're trying to put pieces in place. They already have Drake London and Kyle Pitts. Good running game. He just has to keep the ball moving down the field, making the right checks, be the adult, like you said, and game manage more than so much when he was in Minnesota, sling it around.
I will tell you, we're after the end of this week. Once we record this weekend, we're probably gonna go do a video that's like the biggest winners and losers, whether it be a team, a player, what have you. Somebody that's not even a free agent that I think is one of the biggest winners from the Kirk Cousins deal is Kyle Pitts. Because he's been a guy that just, unrealized air yards, just overthrown targets, just has not he's really struggled the last 2 years with Marcus Mariota, Desmond Ridder, Taylor Heineke. They just can't give him the ball. Then Jonnu Smith is doing end arounds because of play calling. And now Arthur Smith's out the door. You have a grown up that loves throwing to tight ends.
Yeah.
TJ Hawkinson took another level when he got traded to Minnesota. We've seen Jordan Reed in the past, Kyle Rudolph. I'm not saying he's instantly going to get back to 1,000-yard season,
right,
like he did his rookie year, but he should get a lot more targets in a more upbeat offense. So that's kind of one of the things that stuck out when I thought about this move.
Okay, well, let's jump over to Baker. Tampa Bay re-signs Baker 3 for $100. That kind of shows you how confident they are in him and how well they actually thought he did this last year, which is, we both thought he did really well. But people, I think, have a stigma to just dislike Baker. It's kind of like Bo Nix coming out of the draft. It's just one of those things where you just dislike the guy because he is who he is. But yeah, Baker gets $100 million, and that's something that maybe we didn't expect prior to last season.
Absolutely not. I mean, there was talk that Kyle Trask could be midpoint of the season. They might kind of start to tank if they had a rough start to the year and give him a look, and then be a top 5 pick and figure it out from there.
Right.
And they were one of the final 4 teams in the NFC. So massively overachieved. He earned it. I thought we said this before when Mike Evans re-signed and didn't hit the market. I thought that was basically an indication like he wouldn't do that if he didn't already have a preconceived notion that Baker was going to be back.
Right.
So that's a big. It just feels like it fits. The atmosphere there is a lot more laid back. We do things our own way. That's always been Baker's aura, and it just made a lot of sense. And he really cashed in after a big bounce back year.
Absolutely. But yeah, let's jump up to these next guys. We got 5 more guys on this list. And all of them are probably backups or are backups or will probably be considered backups that might start.
Like
bridge players. Jacoby Brissett, who's played many teams. Gardner Minshew came in after Anthony Richardson went down this last year. And then, of course, you've got the Jameis and Mariota. Of course, they're going to come out in the same class again for free agency. So we just kind of have this like bunch of guys that are bridge quarterbacks, like you said. Sam Darnold will possibly start for Minnesota, like we talked about before the show. Just kind of give me your overview on this group.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Washington and the Patriots at 2 and 3. All likelihood, we're gonna put a pin down on the position quarterback,
right,
and then pencil in who we believe it's Daniels to Washington at the very moment, and then Patriots will either pick Drake May or surprisingly JJ McCarthy.
Yeah,
who knows? But that's what it kind of feels like. Both of those guys get journeyman quarterbacks that kind of fit the style of quarterback that they want. And I don't know if the quarterbacks that they pick will be ready week 1. Who knows? But maybe the first month of the season they get some looks. Who knows? It's just we saw a lot of teams with injured quarterbacks last year that did not have backup situations figured out. And so I think teams are really, with the first day and a half of free agency, already 9 off the board. That just shows how we're like, we need to have a backup plan in place.
Yeah, just in case.
And so that's, I think, what happened with those guys. Gardner Minshew was a little bit puzzling going to the Raiders. I was really hoping that he would go back to the Colts because the fit, it seemed like him and Anthony Richardson really hit it off well. But he cashed in once again after a solid, formidable year. That's what a backup quarterback is supposed to do, is have you in the thick of things at the very end of the season. Your ceiling's capped, but that's what you want.
Right.
And, he did enough. Raiders, looks like he's either going to be a bridge or, original starter. He's the most likely of those 5 to have an extended run as a starter, at least in the short term. But it still remains to be seen what the Raiders will do. They're kind of still in a weird spot. And then Aiden O'Connell is also there as well. Who knows if they just want to run with those guys.
Yeah.
And then also Jameis Winston is the one that's least likely to start. Cleveland decided to move off of Joe Flacco and go with Jameis, who just has always gotten in his own way from a talent perspective. And, Deshaun is really on thin ice. So Joe Flacco is a 39-year-old, peg leg quarterback, can get you to the playoffs. You got to do your thing.
Add a gunslinger, right?
Exactly. So.
But so that's kind of the overview of our quarterbacks. There's 3 big deals and a bunch of guys that are just kind of fun to talk about. But yeah, let's jump over to running backs. There's this was probably the craziest little running back group I've seen in a while during free agency, just moving around. Of course, the headline is Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs. Those 2 guys are gonna, we will talk about this whole situation because I think Saquon Barkley was probably one of the steals of free agency so far. He got less money than Darnell Mooney and Gabe Davis, which we talked about earlier, per year. And that's just crazy to me. He almost got the same amount of money as Dalton Schultz. So I think that, just kind of thinking about, running backs in general, I'm a believer that you don't have to pay running backs the crazy prices. They're probably what wide receiver 2s should probably make. But the fact that, we're disrespecting them at the moment is what we're kind of doing.
Yeah.
So.
And with Saquon, I agree. Very cheap deal. Obviously, you don't want to pay running backs, but when you have the ability to do so, just go get your guy. I mean, Christian McCaffrey was not really impacting winning in a positive way with the Panthers. San Fran went to get him anyway, and then he would have been Super Bowl MVP.
Yeah.
Offensive Player of the Year, the whole 9 yards. He's the best running back in football. He does it all. There's very few that can do that.
Right.
Or be that type of running back for you. Saquon is one of those guys. And with the recent running back market, he's just kind of been one of the victims that we've seen. Philly, I think, did a good job stealing him away. I don't think that was probably the best way to invest their money based on the success that they've had with Hurts as a running quarterback, with Swift, Sanders, Boston Scott, even Kenneth Gainwell, can still be formidable backs. I don't think that was the direction they needed to go. But, if there's not a lot of nibbles, go get the guy.
For sure.
He's from Penn State. We'll have a lot of fans in that regard. And it makes sense. He's going to be a highly prioritized fantasy running back.
Absolutely.
I have no denying that he's going to have the best line he's ever had. Most opportunities to succeed, won't have 8-man boxes for the most part. And if they do, it's worried about Jalen Hurts as well. So you're not getting the full 8.
Right.
It made a lot of sense from a money perspective for them. With Josh Jacobs, he's the other guy that we talked about, obviously leaving your Raiders, but they did a little bit of a swap, taking out Aaron Jones and then putting in Josh Jacobs, who they've kind of always wanted to have a run game be a heavy part of their offense. Now, instead of being a 2-man punch, it's really just they're going the bell cow route. Give me your thoughts on the fit on that. Is that the ideal situation for him?
I think it's a great situation for him, but I just hate 4-year deals for running backs. I think that's my biggest problem with this whole thing, is that it's a 4-year deal instead of like a 2-year or 3-year deal. I'm big on overpay him. Say instead of going 12 million a year, go 14 million a year for 2 years and do 28, and then reassess in 2 years because you could have had injuries, you could have had whatever. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. I think that he's going to be great for the first couple of years. They have great receivers. Jordan Love, like you said with the Eagles, they're not going to see a bunch of 8-man boxes. He's going to get the ball. He's going to be able to run the ball they run a very open offense. So he's going to be running outside zone a lot, things like that he's really comfortable with, one cut type of back. So no, he's going to be in a great situation. I just don't like the contract itself.
Yeah. I mean, when we've seen recent contracts, a lot of people look at guys like Todd Gurley and Zeke as ruining the running back market. Well, problem wasn't the annual salary that they got. It's that they were 5 and 6 year deals.
Yeah.
Now that's not what Josh Jacobs is, but it's still like we said, we'd rather pay running backs high and then have a short window to where it doesn't affect you in the long run if it didn't work out immediately. Kind of transitioning into that, another one, Derrick Henry. He's been the best running back for a long time. Going to Baltimore, perfect situation for him.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's 2 years. Whatever the money is, if it's too much or too little, it doesn't matter. It's 2 years. And even if it didn't work out in a year, it's not a big hit on your books next year, and you could just move on and not even remember that it happened.
Well, I think they do this with wide receivers. You just watched Mike Evans. He got a 2-year, $52 million deal, right? He got a 2-year deal because he's 32. Well, that seems like the same situation with Derrick Henry here. He's getting a 2-year deal because he's past 28, 29. He's almost 30, I believe. So that's kind of the thing with him. I actually think that Minnesota did a good job going and getting Aaron Jones for a year.
Now that was a pretty fun signing.
Yeah, and you're going to get the rivalry now, and it's going to be that whole thing too, because he's a really good back when he's playing, and for 1 year he's not going to hurt you. And then if you say, oh well, hey, he did really good this year, let's pay him for 2 years next year, and then you don't feel like you're just like throwing money at running backs.
Yeah, and you're like stuck with somebody.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I mean that was a fun signing in my opinion. They tried the bargain running back last year with Alexander Madison, and obviously did not work. They had one of the least efficient run games. Ty Chandler is still there. He had a game or two that he broke some runs, but he's just a guy.
Yeah.
And they needed an upgrade, and they got one. Kind of grouping some in together that are all fun pairings. I mean, you got DeAndre Swift cashing in, going to Chicago, one of the more efficient run games in football the last couple of years, but just have gone the committee route. Joe Mixon getting traded for a conditional 7th to the Texans. Just going to be a offensive fireworks show. And then you have, look at Austin Eckler, who clearly declined, but he went to a perfect situation with a perfect complement to him. Looking at those kinds of that tier of running backs, give me like something that stands out. Who's your favorite of those?
I think personally, my favorite is Austin Eckler, just because of the complement and the style that they're going to be doing. Because they go away from Antonio Gibson, who we're going to get to in a second, and they get basically a guy that's proven that he can do what Antonio Gibson came in to do. And he's not going to be asked to, we always worried about Austin Eckler because he ran the ball 15, 16, 17 times. He just can't do it. If he runs the ball 8 times a game, I'm really happy because he's probably going to get 4 catches, maybe 3, 4 catches a game. And, he's going to make plays in other ways that are going to help, first off, fantasy owners. That's what we talk to. People that watch this show are about, well, how can I make my money? Of course. Well, Austin Eckler only is going to make, they didn't put a bunch of money to Austin Eckler either. He's older. He got a 2-year deal for $8 million. Great. That's an awesome deal to me. So I think he's my favorite. I think DeAndre Swift, of course, needs to get talked about, but he's in a 3-headed monster, which is a little different than with Chicago. I don't know if DeAndre Swift is actually going to be the fantasy impact that we're expecting, because they do have Roshan Johnson. They do have
Khalil Herbert.
Yeah, so it's like he kind of is similar back to those two guys, and I could see them just rotating the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely high risk. In terms of fantasy, it depends on where we go. in terms of the rankings, because obviously it's a massive shakeup, at least at this position. From what we saw, obviously the top 5 are probably in any which order, but they're comfortable options. And then after that, it's all these guys.
Yeah.
And we just got to mix and match. But if you're going to put DeAndre Swift as a back end RB1, probably a pass for me. But if he's in the same range that he was last year, when people thought, oh, he's going to Philly, that's not a good fit. He's coming off a down year, 8th round
committee, what they expect,
and he might outperform. But if he's in the 3rd or 4th range, it's probably somewhere that's a little too rich.
Yeah.
But that's the same with most of these guys. I mean, I don't really feel comfortable with a single guy just being vaulted into a high-end RB1 situation.
Right, of course.
Other than maybe Saquon, just based on the situation. And Josh Jacobs, obviously, too.
Right. The ones that are expected to be there, though.
One who I did not like of this group was Tony Pollard. I thought that was not the ideal signing for them. Obviously, they were going to move on from Derrick Henry to give him an opportunity to compete as he's going, but they actually spent more annually for Tony Pollard, additional year, and complimenting him next to Tyjae Spears, who's the same type of back. Yeah. It just feels more Tampa Bay-ish, where they just have Rachaad White, Chase Edmonds getting receptions out of the backfield. So fantasy owners are like, oh, they're being efficient, they're being good, they're scoring every now and again. Well, it's Tampa Bay was dead last in rushing for the second straight year. Tennessee, I feel like, is heading more towards that route. They have one of the worst lines in football. Just a huge downgrade situation for him. So I feel like that's the biggest problem that I have in this whole range of guys.
I just don't see Tennessee being able to win games without it. Like that's another thing too. Like we want to talk about catching the ball in the backfield. That's great, but normally you throw the ball in the backfield when you're down. Like game script wise, you're not winning games if your running backs are catching the ball that much, and if they're both built the same way. It just doesn't make sense. It really didn't make sense to me, and I think we texted immediately, like, that just is not the fit that makes any sense to us. But, I'm a big fan of, and the other thing is I'm a big fan of Tyjae Spears, so...
Yeah, and it kind of depreciates.
It's not as exciting now. It's like, well, now I need someone to get injured, and I don't ever want to wish for that. That's terrible. Yeah. So
I think it was just based a situational fit. It just didn't work. I still think that Tony Pollard can have a role in the NFL. If you swapped him with like Antonio Gibson going to New England and complimenting Ramondre Stevenson, who's more the bell cow, and then passing downs is going to be Antonio Gibson now. That's the role that he thrives in. That's where he can maximize his success. Same thing with Austin Eckler as he's aging up. That was his role, probably a little bit more glorified because he's the one that's in his prime. But the fit was just not there for me.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, let's jump over to wideouts. There's not nearly as many wideouts, which is actually kind of surprising to me, but
it's actually not to me. Okay. I think that everybody values this receiving class in the draft so strongly that they're hesitant to do stuff. So the biggest moves that we've seen are Mike Evans and Michael Pittman getting re-signed.
Right.
And that's just kind of, after that happened, it's really just Ridley and the rest. It's a bunch of guys, and then Calvin Ridley, who was uncertain on, would he return to Jacksonville? Would somebody overpay for him? It sounds like as of this moment, it's coming down to the Patriots or the Jags.
Right.
We saw a little bit of new information. We've said before, if the Jags re-sign Calvin Ridley, they have to also send their second-round pick to Atlanta. Well, new information came out today from Ian Rappaport that said if they pass the deadline from tomorrow, it's actually converted to a third-round pick. Don't know why that hadn't come out before.
Right.
Especially recently. But if that's, in fact, true, that makes it a lot more easier to, give some confidence to get Calvin Ridley.
Well, I also saw, though, his camp is trying to improve the contract if that happens. So if they don't have to give up a second, what they'll do is they're like, okay, well, we want more money.
Yeah, exactly. Which kind of makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, I'll take a discount if you're taking the second round pick to invest in me. But if you're not, then I want the money that I...
Right. I'll wait to help you, basically.
Exactly. And so, and then we saw a trade with Jerry Jeudy, moving on from Denver for a few mid-round picks. He just has not panned out like we thought he would. He was basically, with CeeDee Lamb, the best prospect in his class to me. Justin Jefferson was right below them. Obviously, in hindsight, massive mistake, but no one at the time thought Justin Jefferson was wide receiver 1 in that class. It was either CD or it was Jerry Jeudy.
Right.
Henry Ruggs snuck out of nowhere and was overdrafted, but that was besides the point.
Right,
he was supposed to pan out the way he did, and it's been injuries. It just the fit. Maybe it's quarterback situation. Who knows? But he gets traded to Cleveland, and he's going to be on his 1-year prove it deal with them. Give me your thoughts on that move. Is that going to help his stock? Is that going to help vault him back to the talents that we thought he would reach?
I don't really see that helping him actually at all. I think, like that, of course, he'll be the wide receiver 2 against a deep threat, good route runner in Amari Cooper, but he kind of saw that same situation in Denver. I just don't know that this helps him in any way. I just think, Deshaun was inconsistent in that way too. They haven't had the great passing game. They're not going to have as great of a running game because I don't expect Nick Chubb to be able to come off the ACL the same way like we saw with I'm blanking. I'm sorry, the New York Jets running back Breece Hall. Yeah, no one has ever done it. So and also Nick Chubb's older, so I just don't think that there's as many opportunities in this situation. Cleveland should continue doing Cleveland, where they lean on their defense, try to run the ball, and it's just going to be a lot less opportunities for Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah, I mean it's weird to me just because he feels like a younger version of Amari Cooper, but hasn't reached the talents that Amari Cooper has. The thing that might benefit him is that Amari Cooper is getting up there in age. He's past the 30-year-old threshold now. He's had injuries, issues in the past. He was healthy for the most part last year, but we've seen him kind of go every other year, kind of dealing with some nagging stuff.
Right.
And he was on the injury report a lot last year, despite not missing a ton of games. That's really his only avenue to me for targets. Because we can't forget about David Njoku, who broke out with Joe Flacco, and Deshaun's always liked targeting tight ends. So it just, to me, that's not the situation you want to go to for a 1 year.
Right.
But I mean, we look at some of the other after that, it's just a huge drop off. And Gabe Davis going to Jacksonville, another guy that's just I don't get the fit.
No, I think I get the fit if they bring back Calvin Ridley, because then you have like your 6'3" over the top guy, and then you have your route runner, and you have your speedster and Christian Kirk.
But
it just it's weird.
Here's the problem with that. Calvin Ridley, is it fair to say he's going to get over $20 million annually, whether it be a 2-3-year deal?
I think so. Yeah.
All right, so that's $20 million.
Yeah.
Christian Kirk's $20 million. Gabe Davis is $13 million.
Yeah, I know.
Zay Jones is $7 million, and then you just re-upped Evan Ingram. That's a lot of money for your pass score when you have a deep receiving class that you could probably get a mid-round pick and get the same value that Gabe Davis would have given you, because he's been a guy that, he's durable. He, plays 90% of the snaps all the time. But when you play 90% of the snaps and you're barely noticed, that's really, to me, telling in itself.
Yeah, for sure. Well, also, they have to pay Josh Allen. Mm-hmm. They just franchise tagged him. We talked about that on our franchise show.
Mm-hmm. And he's one of the only ones that really we haven't heard any progress towards the deal or anything.
Right.
At least with T. Higgins, there's the trade demand.
Right.
He's not on the slides, but that's one that's kind of open for speculation on who's he going to. But it sounds like he's moving on. But with it didn't make sense to me financially, especially if you are bringing back Calvin Ridley. To me, if you're not, and you're going to target a receiver in the early rounds, okay, maybe. Sure. But I didn't think it was a need for that much. And the same exact deal, identical to him, Darnell Mooney, former 1,000-yard receiver that has really had the last 2 years really struggled to produce.
Right.
I did see a stat today that he was actually overthrown on 40% of his targets, which is an insane fact to think of. Like every 2 of every 5 passes, you're just open and just getting. So I think there's room for improvement, but I think that was a huge gamble on I'm hoping he
his
can get
upside,
back to.
yeah. I mean, he's had 453 yards per season in the last 2 seasons.
Yeah.
And 3 total touchdowns.
Yeah. That's
And
not all on.
no, of course not. And of course, and
a lot of it had to do with it.
He's been hurt a little bit. I get it, but at the same time, I'm not going to put my money. Not okay. If I put Saquon and Darnell Mooney next to each other, and I said pick one, same price, I'm not picking Darnell Mooney.
Yeah.
I'm paying Saquon. I'm paying him $2 million more than Philly did. But I mean, of course, this is not the situation where you do that. You know, like this is a different. Like you wouldn't pay him while you have Bijan and Tyler Algier. But still, like I'm trying to explain.
The only thing that really saves it to me is just the fact that if you took away the money and you just blindly like Darnell Mooney to the Falcons, I like it.
Yeah.
Third, fourth option, not going to get more than 5-6 targets a game, but every now and again we'll catch a deep ball. Kirk Cousins loves to throw downfield.
Yeah.
He's made KJ Osborne look like a great 3. I'm not sure if he is, but you know, he can make a lot of receivers work. I think it's an ideal fit to potentially maximize what he once was.
Right.
But then when you do see the contract, then it's just like, okay, what the hell?
Yeah, I don't understand it. So, yeah, let's get off of wide receivers. Very short list. Very good draft. So we'll get into the draft later too. But let's jump over to the tight ends. So the main tight ends that got really got the best of it is Hunter Henry and Dalton Schultz. Henry they both got re-signed to their respective teams. Hunter Henry got $9 million annually, and Dalton Schultz got $12 million annually. I guess this is probably the non-sexy position, but kind of give me your thoughts on what you think.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bunch of starting caliber tight ends, but got rotational guys that kind of they are what they are, and I don't think really any of them were just crazy overpaid. Noah Fant did make a ton of sense at that price point.
I agree.
But he's also a former top 20 pick that maybe if he didn't get traded to a situation that already had 3 tight ends on the roster, he would have produced better.
Right.
And 2 of those guys that were fighting with play on time are gone. So maybe that could work. Who knows? But, you look at Colby Parkinson, great blocking tight end, is basically an insurance policy for Tyler Higbee. So he's going to be a tight end 2, fill in tight end 1 as he recovers because he had a late season torn ACL. And again, blocking tight end, they really leaned into Kyron Williams last year. It sounds like it's going to be more of the same. So fit made sense. Jonnu Smith, receiving tight end, gadget guy. Miami doesn't really use tight ends a lot, but when they do, it's successful. Look at what Mike Gesicki did out of the slot. That's kind of something similar to Jonnu Smith because they'd rather not use,
Yeah, and they just brought back Drew Sample, who's their blocking tight end. So they get the blocking, and then they get the receiving tight end in Mike Gesicki.
Yeah, I look at Mike Gesicki, speaking of him, signing with Cincinnati on a 1-year deal. I mean, they've just kind of been recycling veteran tight ends with, Hayden Hurst, Irv Smith Jr., CJ Uzama. All of them have had their moments. He's probably the most talented receiving tight end of them all.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a fit. Who knows with how they'll kind of stylistically move with all the moving parts with their skill group because Joe Mixon's out the door. Tyler Boyd's out the door. It sounds like T. Higgins is out the door. It's really just Jamar now. So we'll see how they kind of stylistically adapt to that. He could be a serviceable for what it is. Zach Ertz, I think he's just trying to retire on his own terms.
Hey, I actually think this is one of my favorite tight end pickups. I mean, you get a veteran in a room with 2 very young tight ends, so I think that's always helpful. Just kind of learning the nuances of playing the position when you're running routes and stuff because Jesse Bates has looked okay at times, but he just isn't consistent enough. So hopefully bringing in a veteran like that can help him.
Yeah, and then Gerald Everett, last guy.
Right.
He's been solid wide or tight end 2.
Yeah.
And had a fine year, if you want to call it that. He goes to Chicago to back up Cole Kmet.
Yeah. No top 10s. No top 10 guys here, but, just a bunch of guys that help your team in different ways. So I think that's pretty much what we have to say for this group. But yeah, so very short group for the tackles, for the offensive tackles. Very big group for the interior offensive linemen. So we'll get to them in a second. Obviously, at the top of this is an extension in Deion Dawkins, but that was probably one of the best ways for them to decrease cap hit. They restructured his deal to decrease like the cap hit. So I think that was a good move for them. They also did that with Josh Allen in his deal. And then Mike Aninwu, who we've been talking about for the Patriots, we've talked about, why did they transitional tag Kyle Duggar? Well, now we know. Now we know they wanted to pay him. So
yeah, and obviously he's got experience at multiple positions at the guard spot and at the right tackle spot. So he's very flexible, and he gives you the opportunity to, basically pick the best lineman available instead of just kind of, we definitely need a tackle or we definitely need a guard.
Right.
He was fine for what it was. He's one of those that hasn't really achieved any Pro Bowl caliber status, but he can. And, I would put his contract more so into the guard of the whole position just kind of had some balloon deals due to the depth at the position. He was probably more of a beneficiary of that compared to the tackle because it's just really him and Colt McKivitz, who kind of cashed in as a part-time tackle at 1 year.
It's pretty awful for San Francisco last year. He was by far the worst player on their offense.
Yeah.
And gave up multiple sacks. So I'm kind of surprised they actually brought him back and not tried to find. But as you can see, there's only 3 tackles on this list. So that means there's not very many otherwise. So
there's not really a ton of, withstanding tackles in the whole league that can play on both sides or backup. Usually the backup tackles that sign deals are in the $5 to $6 million range as a backup that can play anywhere. Essentially, if somebody went down, that's kind of the range that I see him. Maybe $1 million too much, but it's also a 1 year deal. So
he just feels like it's kind of funny. We talked about bridge quarterbacks earlier. He's a bridge tackle.
Yes,
I expect them to get a tackle in the draft, and if Colton needs to play, Colton can play. If we're like, hey, this rookie's him, we need to get him on the field as much as possible, then he's playing, and you have a backup that can do a little bit of everything. So I think it makes a lot of sense. It's just I don't necessarily think you can allow for the best team, talented wise, across in football, 1 weak link. You need to fix that position. So that's kind of my thoughts.
And really, with the remaining free agents that we still yet to hear anything from, Tyron Smith, Connor, Jonah Williams.
Yeah.
There's also Connor Williams as a free agent, but those guys haven't signed yet, obviously. So it's very weak. That's one of the few positions that the big dogs haven't heard much from. So we'll just kind of see where it goes from there.
Right.
But last year was the much stronger tackle class because basically all of them were up at the same time. And there was a lot of trades and moves because of it.
Right.
But interior lineman, like we said, let's transition over. That was really what position singularly gained the most in terms of financial. It was guard.
Oh, yeah.
Like their guards got money out the ass. It was crazy. The contracts, like Carolina invested $153 million between Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt.
Yeah. Well, I think, you look at this list and you're like, wow, there's multiple guards that have $20+ million deals. It's like Robert Hunt's over there. Landon Dickerson got $21 million a year. It's like those are hefty. Insane because the franchise tag for wide receiver, who is a much more important position in everybody's eyes for the most part, is at 21.8. So that should tell you that this is a big year. Obviously, salary cap will go up. Things will change. Those won't be the same numbers in a few years, and these will be fine numbers, normal numbers. But right now, they are just like, holy crud.
Yeah, and really, most of the guards, they're kind of still coming into their own. So it remains to be seen if they can be top 5. But nobody is an already established like top 5 at their position.
Right.
Jonah Jackson goes to the Rams in addition to Kevin Dotson re-signed. And so they really kind of doubling down, like we said with Kobe Parkinson. We're going run heavy, balls to the wall. We're going to come right at you. Jonah Jackson, obviously coming from Detroit, they had multiple guards to go with. They one that you don't see, Graham Glasgow. They re-signed him as an aging vet to a reasonable deal.
Yeah.
Instead, 3 for $20.
Yeah.
Which is much less compared to the field. So, and then, the center class as well. I know we talked about the guards. You got Tyler Bedoch, Lloyd Cushenberry, and Andre James all got $10+ million. deals. Was any of those that stuck out to you? Obviously, James was a re-signing, but Cushenberry and Vidoc going to new teams.
I actually think, all three of these guys help their teams a lot. I mean, we talk about Tennessee and how terrible their offensive line is. Lloyd Cushenberry is going to help them immensely right off the bat, so that'll be super good. Andre James is a Raider, and I'm so happy we got him back because he is talk about the old school Raiders. He's he is a Raider.
Yeah, so, and he was a big part of the reason why they're underrated top 10 caliber line.
Yeah,
like absolutely. They've graded out top 10 past 2 years, and he's one of the few guys that has been a mainstay. So yeah, I like the move. One that I didn't really get was John Runyon going to the Giants. That was a lot of money for a guy that finally started, and he was getting rotated in and out basically every game.
Yeah,
on the backstretch of the season. So the Giants, who have had line issues we talked about, they needed to fix that because outside of Andrew Thomas, that's really all they got. That's not the ideal guy I'd go with.
Absolutely.
But it remains to be seen. I like the Tyler Biadasz signing a lot. He was a really good center for Dallas. Obviously they couldn't afford to retain him, but he reunites with Dan Quinn, as you will see on a few other defensive players with Washington. They made a lot of moves, and so they had the most cap space coming into free agency, and they're putting it to good use.
Yeah, and we didn't really talk about the highest annually paid player yet, Landon Dickerson.
Yes.
He is awesome. He is just a great football player. So, they lost Jason Kelce, and so now you have a guy that hopefully can replace his style of play, his leadership, his locker room. Yeah, it's because they're going to need somebody. Brandon Graham is the only one coming back.
And we loved him as like a first-round caliber prospect coming out because he had multi-position flexibility, great lineman, athletic, doing the worm and stuff. I remember seeing, and he just had multiple significant injuries that it was just like there's some baggage there.
Yeah,
but he stayed healthy for the most part, and he cashed in. I did say earlier, there's not really any guards that are top 5 at their position that did get it extended or signed. He's right on the cusp of there. And then this could very well be the year that he really does truly break out to be an all-pro caliber guard.
Yeah, and so I think this was a pretty good group. I mean, top to bottom. But at the same time, it might be too much money. We'll see. We'll see how it ends up because, 2 teams on here paying one's 153 and then the other one's 99 million for 2 guys already. So we'll see what happens. But let's jump over to the interior defensive line. Some massive names on this group. Of course, everybody's favorite Chris Jones. And then a guy that broke out this year, Justin Matabuke, who we've talked about before on the franchise, that got franchise tagged, now got extended, which we love to see. Christian Wilkins, who is, another guy that I just love having on your team. Good locker room guy, add to the deal. So those top 3 guys, who do you think has the most impact on their team going forward?
It's obviously Chris Jones.
Yeah.
They had to break the bank for him. Obviously, he was the heaviest contract to date so far, and even though it was probably an overpay, you had to keep it because the subtraction of him was way worse than the retaining him and not being able to maybe retain Willie Gay, who left. We'll talk about him in a little bit. He's the heart and soul of their defense that makes plays in and out. Doesn't always show up in the statistics, but he is the best defensive lineman in football right now. And to maximize your chance to have a three-peat, he had to return.
Right, of course.
And then obviously one that kind of caught us off guard because we didn't hear any rumblings about it. Christian Wilkins going to the Raiders. They're really kind of going into the Raider way mentality, and that was a really, really fun signing to me. I know you're stoked about it. Give me your thoughts on him and what to expect at least going forward.
Well, he's been voted in the past players to not you most dislike players on the other team, right? Like you love being on his team. He's a funny, interesting guy, but when you're playing against him, you do not like him.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that Raiders like talking about. We're in past, of course, you think about old Raiders, they were mean, they were dirty, those types of things. Well, it's not necessarily these, it's not like in Dominican Sue where he's stepping on your hand and stuff. It's like just a hard playing football player. You takes on double teams really well. We've got, Max Crosby on the outside. Hopefully Tyree Wilson can, bring it up. But Malcolm Kuntz has been great for us too.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Spillane, the whole defense is looking a lot better. I'm really sad about Amik Robertson, who we'll talk about later. But, we have, a lot of really good pieces on defense.
Yeah, I
And
mean, if Tyree Wilson, he had a formidable rookie year.
Yeah.
If he can take the next step, like you guys have been trying to do, to get out of your top 10 pick as an edge rusher, it's going to be one of the best, if not the best, defensive lines in football next year. And the way that they played towards the end of the stretch and shutting down Kansas City like they did, and really kind of taking it to people with some smash mouth on both sides, it just kind of fits.
Yeah, absolutely. So he's exciting. He's just an exciting player. But there's a couple of other guys on this list that are just, consistent veterans, do it year in and year out, So I kind of, Grover Stewart gets re-signed to Colts.
Yeah, that was a
Colts,
great
awesome.
value re-signing for Indy. They haven't really brought in anybody, but they re-signed all the important guys at reasonable deals.
Five guys that I think is what Adam Schefter tweeted out earlier, that 5 guys, and everybody on there was like, oh, those are all like guys I want on my team.
Exactly.
Kind of
So yeah, that was a fun one. And then we see some re-signings like Daquan Jones, and then Justin Jones is really one of the ones that Arizona gets a formidable starter.
Yeah.
Formidable salary.
Yeah.
It's not nothing to sneeze at, but it's not something that's going to knock your socks off. Yeah, just give me your thoughts on some of the rest of the guys on this list, and who was probably your favorite of the bunch.
I think it's got to be Grover Stewart, because he's just, that kind of guy that. My big thing is, like, the new football is based on, can you rush the passer? Can you get after, he's not that guy, but he's going to take on 2 blockers. He's going to hold his own against 2 blockers. He's not going to let them get up on their linebackers. And as an ex-linebacker, I love that, because then I get to run and play free, basically. So he's one of those guys that I love seeing get paid.
Right.
He didn't get a massive deal by any means, but he got a good deal for what he is as a player. I guess if I had to pick another one, I don't know. I kind of want to see what happens to Javon Kinlaw.
Yeah, that's what I was about to bring up.
Moving from the D line at San Francisco and getting a new opportunity to be a guy rather than being around a bunch of guys, I guess. First round pick, probably. Both of our favorite D lineman in that class, I believe. Is that the Derrick Brown class? I can't remember. Okay, so I think I had Derrick Brown over him, but close, whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like, okay, now we get another guy, get a chance to see what he can do.
Yeah, he's probably one that was we put on. Obviously, it's an undisclosed amount, but it's a 1-year prove-it deal, and he gets to be right next to Quentin Williams, who's one of the top 5 defensive tackles in football.
Yeah,
and instead of San Fran, who like to be more of a rotation, this is your spot.
Right.
Are you going to keep it or not? That's kind of how the Jets have operated with their defensive line in recent years, and I don't know if he'll break out, but I think it's the right opportunity. We'll get into Bryce Huff in a moment, but he cashed in out of nowhere. So there's guys that have come in and really done well in that system, and he's somebody that's capable of it.
Yeah, well, actually, let's just jump over to edges, because that's the next section. But I think, one of my least favorite signings is on this group. Of course, Bryce Huff getting 3 years, $51 million. He's a pass rusher only. He doesn't necessarily play on every down. I have a hard time paying guys like that. And then my least favorite signing goes to Minnesota. Jonathan Bernard, 4 years, $76 million, $19 million per year. Nothing crazy, but at the same time, you're getting a guy that had 1 good year of production. 12.5 sacks this year. Prior to that, 10.5 sacks in 3 years. It's like, okay, everybody knows on your contract year, you play harder. It's just how it goes. And he got his payday because of it. He found a way to get the money. So
Yeah, which is very interesting. I don't necessarily disagree with that at all. It's a risk,
Right.
but it also was probably one of the best available ones on the market, at least free agency wise. And you kept him under 20 million. So with Daniil Hunter getting 25, I misspoke. He is the highest paid at the position. But instead of getting him for 6 million less, you're getting a version of him that isn't as talented right now. But let's ask ourselves that question a year from now. He could very well, you know, replace that production at least in a formidable way.
Right.
Didn't break the bank. We've seen many edge contracts go 25 to 30 million, and you kept them under 20. So I think it was more so the length that I was concerned about, because it kind of reminded me of Carl Lawson a little bit from a couple of years ago. Has a breakout year with Cincinnati. Not a lot of sack production, pressure rate,
Right.
but he was on a really strong defensive line, goes to the Jets, and then immediately gets hurt, and then gets cut.
Right.
So it can go both ways. But yeah, I'm not as high on others in terms of the value at it, just because of the fact that it's not just about, oh, what is X player getting versus this player.
Right.
It's also about the duration, and did you invest in a guy that has done it, or are you just gambling on, I hope he can keep on progressing? When a lot of these guys, when they hit 26, 27, you've seen the best of them, and they've kind of plateau after that, unless you're the lead of the elite, which typically are the guys that get traded, or the big deals.
Right. Well, the Vikings actually didn't just invest in him; they also invested in Andrew Van Ginkel for $20 million for 2 years, which is a more comfortable deal, time wise, like you're saying.
Right.
But Grenard's only 25 years old. He's only been in the league for 4 years. So you can also make the case that maybe that's the right length just based on age. But he wasn't. It would be one thing if he was like a 2-year presence, consistent. He gets what happened to me, Kurt, Will Anderson comes in. Will Anderson takes a lot of attention. Jonathan Grenard makes plays. It wasn't, he needed somebody opposite him to help him in that case. I don't know that Andrew Van Ginkel is going to be the guy that can go and, take extra blockers. Like, really, it's going to be focused on him. And I just don't know that he can redo what he did this year in a different system.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that whatsoever. But flipping the situation, because they basically swapped pass rushers. Daniil Hunter was one of the big ones that happened late in the day today. Houston just continuing to improve their roster. They've been one of my favorite teams with the moves they've made. Obviously, Grenard gets 12.5, and that's a rookie year where Will Anderson sets the franchise record in sacks.
Right.
But it wasn't out of this world. Now you're bringing Daniil Hunter, who has 87 career sacks already. He's 29, obviously getting up there, but hasn't dealt with a ton of injuries, and he's in a fresh, brand new situation. Give me your thoughts on that. How is that going to work? Is that the ideal fit for him?
I just say watch out, because really, like, ideal fit for an edge like him is probably a 4-3, truly, but he can do whatever he wants, kind of thing. I don't know if you like really ever like. I mean, I'm sure you have really looked at him. The man has muscles on his muscles. It's pretty impressive. He will be fine wherever he goes, basically. And now he gets to go to a young, electrifying team that has a lot of cap space, and he's not the only guy that got brought in to help them. It's exciting. It's an exciting place to be at, and sometimes that fuels confidence, play style. I just think, he's going to be revamped. Yes, he's played for Minnesota for a long time. They haven't necessarily ever been exciting to me, except for maybe 2 years ago when they were winning games by one score all year. But now you're on the team that's like exciting, and I think that he's going to do great. He's great in the run. He's great at getting after the passer. They got the guy,
And on top of that, annually, yes, he is the highest paid at his position this free agency class. Scary deal.
Well, I mean, except for Brian Burns.
Well, Brian Burns was a tag
Yeah,
trade.
right.
So I'm considering guys who true free
Right,
agents,
true free agent. Okay, gotcha.
annually got the most, and it's 2 years.
Yeah.
So little risk, and right now Houston all of a sudden is a top 4 team to me in the AFC, and you at this point need the vets that are just like, I've been here before.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna help bring you over the top, and I think he's one of those guys.
They still have cap space too.
Yeah,
it's crazy. Like they still have opportunities to continue getting better.
Exactly. And then kind of switching up a little bit. Another tandem we'll talk about. You did bring up Brian Burns. We'll tie him in together with Leonard Williams.
Yeah.
Brian Burns tagged by Carolina and then gets traded.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's a massive, massive difference compared to the 2 first-round picks they would have gotten had they traded him to the Rams a season and a half ago.
Right.
But the Giants really made a splash with that. Give me your thoughts on him getting next to Kayvon Thibodeau and Dexter Lawrence. Is that excite you at all? Is that a move you would have made?
I think it's an exciting defensive line. I just think they're going to be on the field a lot.
Yeah.
Making moves like this are great, but their full cohesion on their team just isn't there to me. And so that's going to hurt them, like at the end of the day, like, yeah, he might have more sacks than he's ever had, but they're still going to be getting beat by, 10 to 20 points. And so it doesn't really matter because they don't have other positions locked down in the same way that they need to. So I think that's my biggest take,
Right.
I guess.
And also, like, he's a very solid player, but he is more so an edge rusher than he is an all-around.
Right, exactly.
And he doesn't get a lot of opportunities to pass rush last couple of years, being from Carolina,
mm-hmm.
Trailing as much as they were.
Right.
They were on the field a lot, but, he's not getting 10 sacks. He goes right over to New York, who
Same
is
situation.
going to be trailing a lot, and you're not going to be pass rushing a ton.
Yep.
So I think he's one of those that on the surface, it doesn't look like he'll live up to the hype, at least from a statistical perspective, but it just kind of depends on how quickly the Giants can turn around their offense, because that's really going to be the key, surprisingly, for, I guess, him, Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau, to maximize what they have.
I'm all about getting good players on good team on the team.
Mm-hmm.
Believe me, I am. But at the same time, I just want, they're just, if you're going to pay a guy $30 million a year, you should probably have some things set in place to like help him or help your team be more productive. I guess like Danielle Hunter goes to Houston. Well, they're going to be putting up a lot of points. You're going to be expecting other teams to have to throw the ball.
Yes.
Like if you're going to pay certain players to do things, you kind of have to understand the state of your team, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do like the fact that they were able to keep their first.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they weren't going to go with the 6th pick, but I was thinking something like a 2nd or 3rd this year and a future 1st.
Right.
Along that range, and they didn't even have to do that. 2nd round and a 5th round.
Yep.
That's all they had, which coincidentally, that is the same type of picks that they just traded away or traded for to get Leonard Williams. Obviously, they're not the identical picks because they traded their own second instead of the Seahawks second, which is 47th. But we'll switch right over. Leonard Williams was dealt at the trade deadline. Seattle took a gamble. True free agent. Didn't really kind of wow us as soon as he moved over, but it's kind of like they were backed into a corner, that one.
I also don't think he's a wow player. Like he's more of a we talked about this before the thing. Do you want to put him at interior defensive line or we put him at edge? And that's kind of where he is too, like he kind of plays like the D-Law position for Dallas, where he's not going to be productive in like the stat line and stuff, but he's going to be productive in how he helps the team. So I don't actually hate I hate the number, I guess, the 64.5, but I don't hate him, being with Seattle. I think it helps their team. 64.5 is a lot though. 20, that's my thing, I guess. Like $21.5 million a year is a lot of money for a guy that's probably not going to get sack production.
Yeah. And moving on, I want to bring up Leonard Floyd, who's kind of been a journeyman pass rusher, former top 10 pick that didn't pan out in Chicago.
Right.
But he was one of those that, maximizes his deal. And he's been signing these short-term deals and performing where he's gone. Now he's going to San Francisco, who loves to have a strong front seven. In addition to that, Yatir Gross-Matos, who's a former first-round pick, he's not on this list, but also signed for 2 for $18. that's kind of like a two moves that kind of signal. I feel like they're moving on from Chase Young. They're not going to bring him back. Obviously, they only had to give up a compensatory third rounder, basically a fourth round pick for him. What are your thoughts on those? It's not awe-inspiring, but it's kind of like a tandem. I wanted to put them together just because it's really, at this point, they're not going to be every down guys.
Well, I think, for those two guys, you're going to get production out of pass rush plays and times. They have a lot of those against San Francisco. They're going to be able up, but at the same time, Leonard Floyd's a better, run stopper. He can help in that regard. He can be moved. He's more of a. He doesn't just have to. Yeah, he's very versatile. He can stand up, walk out, do things that make offensive linemen uncomfortable. You talked about him being a journeyman. I kind of want to put him with Zadarius Smith, who's another journeyman to me.
Yeah.
Both of those guys are just, they go wherever they go. They're not going to do anything like over the top, crazy, exceptional, but they're just going to do their job. And a lot of times you can have those guys at positions as long as you have another guy. And both of these teams have another guy. The Browns have Myles Garrett. 49ers have Nick Bosa. So you're not worried about the production and sacks. You just want them to make a play every once in a while.
Right. Yeah, and like you said, Zadarius Smith had another strong year. He's third team in 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Was part of the number one defense in football last year, and now stays opposite of Myles Garrett. It's just a great tandem to have. Also wanted to bring up AJ Epinesa, who we've liked before. Buffalo's losing a lot of depth on their defensive line, but they opted to extend him, retain him, resign him. That I think was probably best case scenario for the Bills.
Yeah.
For the guys that they were losing. And then last but not least, Shaq Barrett, one of my favorite signings so far. 1 year, $9 million. Miami has just been decimated not only by injury, but the guys that they've lost, and they need pieces because both of their edges, who are probably their second and third best player overall in their entire defense, they both were hurt in December and January.
Right.
So you just don't know, being an Achilles and an ACL, if they can be back. Like, this is Chubb's second torn ACL. This is an Achilles for Jalen Phillips, and I feel like edge is one of those spots that kind of affects him more than most.
Yeah.
Shaq Barrett has been a great veteran. He was one of those guys that had a prove-it deal, broke out, and Tampa Bay opted to resign to a hefty deal, and he just stayed productive.
Yeah. Well, I think with Shaq Barrett, this is the perfect deal for him, for this 1 year deal, to just see if he can do it. And also, Miami's done such a good job of just finding pieces and getting a guy here and there to improve their defense, because they have such a cap difficulty. They were paying, now they're getting rid of Xavier Howard, but they were paying their corners the most in the league for the two corners. They've got some young guys. Jalen Phillips actually has had a ACL tear in college. So,
yes. That's why he
adding to all of it. Yeah, exactly. That's why, he probably would have gone higher for sure. And so adding to just the injury bug, getting a guy that is consistent, that is always a way to go for sure. So I think he makes a lot of sense. But yeah, so let's jump over to the inside linebackers. They are making a lot more money than I think they should in recent years. And there's a couple guys, on this list that we can talk about just money-wise. Do you think it makes sense? I think the first one, of course, is Patrick Queen. He's got 3 years, $41 million.
I think it's so fun taking him from Baltimore.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys that first 3 years, he really struggled to live up to his first round billing. Had a great year last year, second team All-Pro, next to Roquan Smith, but you just were wondering, hey, can I do it on my own?
Right.
For him. And going to Pittsburgh, they've always wanted to have strong linebackers. They haven't done as great of a job consistently in recent years as Baltimore, but it's a great situation for him. That's he's going to be the key to their defense. He's going to be roaming, and now it's his opportunity to where he can be one of the most productive linebackers. It remains to be seen if he will. They've gambled and lost on linebackers in the past. But yeah, the difference I think with this group compared to Edge, Edge was a lot of guys that are prove it deals, or hey, journeyman, or man, I really hope this guy can progress like Jonathan Grenard.
Right.
Whereas linebacker, they've all been really solid for multiple years, and there's not really anybody on this list that has kind of just out of nowhere 1 year breakout, except for Patrick Queen, who was a former first round pick, so it's what we expected. I could put in Kenneth Murray as just another first round pick that just hasn't been living up to his billing. His is one of the more reasonable deals with Tennessee.
Yeah.
He's going to be on the field a lot, and this is the opportunity for him to make what he can out of his career with his second stint.
I think the guy that I kind of want to talk about is Jordan Brooks. I think that his deal going to Miami, we just talked about Miami in the last in the Edge talk, just adding another guy that can go play and do really well, just to a beaten and battered defense that needs players. Jordan Brooks, before Bobby Wagner came to Seattle, had, I believe, top 3 in tackles for 2 years straight. So he can do it. That's something that excites me for them. I think that on this list, who are you most excited about out of all the guys on the list?
I really like the signing of Blake Cashman.
Okay.
He was one that I guess is the lone of the group that is truly out of nowhere breakout, where he was actually graded as a 82 overall, according to PFF, as a linebacker this year. It was top 10 among all linebackers. He's somebody that we didn't really mention in our free agency preview. We didn't even list him when Houston has their potential departures. Didn't know a lot about him, but as we're going through this, he was a guy that just really solid deal. Nothing that broke the bank.
Right.
But the Vikings just did a bunch of moves to improve their front seven. Obviously, Danielle Hunter is a big loss, but signing 3-4 guys already is a big step to improve that unit. So I really like that one. Levante David was a feel good one going back to Tampa Bay. He just again fits Tampa Bay.
Yeah,
he's the Baker Mayfield of the defense.
Yeah.
I've always liked him as a player, and it's a perfect fit. I was surprised that it was only 1 year. I thought he would just, hey, let's finish my career here.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you got guys like Frankie Lavu, Josie Jewell, a little bit unknown based on the places that they played at. But Frankie Lavu has had 100 tackles before. Josie Jewell the same. Yeah. They go to different situations, and it's just like their gambles on.
Yeah, can they continue? They continue doing that? I guess.
Yeah. Now that you are no longer under the radar, you are on the radar. Can you?
Yeah, Carolina and Denver aren't very big news feeds. You don't watch them on TV that often, so you kind of miss out on some of these guys at times. Luvu is not necessarily a household name. I mean, we're going to talk about him right now, of course, and we'll probably continue talking about him in the near future. But if he wasn't graded out very well after this year, I wouldn't surprise me.
Right. Yeah, and then we saw that Zaire Franklin got extended. Another guy that we talked about with the Colts. Very reasonable deal. He was the reason that they were able to move on from Shaq Leonard like they did, because he stepped up and showed out over the last few seasons. And then Azeez Al-Shaair, 3 straight 100 tackle seasons for Tennessee. Hasn't always graded out as the best, but he's also, he's kind of a one-dimensional linebacker.
Right.
He just kind of is a downhill guy, struggles in coverage, and he goes to Houston, another signing that, they have money to spend. I think is a little pricey, but, it's just another signing on another, defensive piece that they added.
Right, and talking about Houston, we talked about Blake Cashman, we talked about Bernard. They just know how to get the most out of their players. So hopefully that'll just continue. But yeah, so let's jump over to cornerback. A couple guys that's highlight this group is, of course, Jalen Johnson got extended after he got franchise tagged. He got a great deal. Or let me rephrase that. The Bears got a great deal.
Yeah.
And because he's actually getting paid less than what the franchise tag was. annually. And so and then Ladarius Sneed, he's looking for a trade partner, so he'll be in our talks later. But who is your favorite of this group right here?
I mean, obviously, Jalen Johnson is my favorite offseason move so far. Mm-hmm. And it's not only how I feel about the player, but it's the salary in which they kept him for. Below the market, he didn't even break the top 5 corners.
Yeah.
And which is crazy because of the fact that it's a really not ideal class. And usually when there's not a bunch of depth at the position, whoever is the big free agent breaks the bank.
Right, of course.
And he didn't do that. Obviously, he was tagged and then signed. Doesn't matter. He under $20 million a year for a guy who's in his prime. It's just perfect. But according to the others, I mean, it's a mixed bag. I mean, there's a lot of good, a lot of bad. We see some guys returning to old spots, like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. He left the Eagles after they didn't want to retain him.
Yeah.
Went to a 1-year prove deal with Detroit. Played fantastic. He was sorely missed by Philly, but at this point, he's one that he gives up a lot of big plays as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, is he the fix for that defense on the back end? I'm not so sure. And also, even though we have him listed as a corner, he's not necessarily a true.
Yeah, he's a nickel.
He's more of a nickel / safety. Kenny Moore actually is now the highest paid nickel.
Yeah,
he's always been fantastic since he kind of came into his own. Like you said with Meek Robertson earlier going to Detroit, they're really the sole weakness on Detroit is their secondary,
right?
And they're just trying to add a couple of vets. So Carlton Davis, Super Bowl experience, another guy that just kind of gets beat, but he's solid. And then Meek Robertson, who had a really strong year, very reasonable deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a couple of strong pieces, and they have a ton of cap space still.
Yeah.
So they may not be done adding to this position, or at least the DB unit as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Chidobe Awuzie going to Tennessee. Tennessee just they can't get corner right.
Mm-hmm.
They've invested so many in free agency, in the draft in the last 5 years, and just none of them are sticking or hitting. He is a guy that was very solid, always in the right place with Dallas, but it always seemed like he either was caught with his hand in the cookie jar or getting mossed.
Right.
A lot of times, similar to the NBA, if you get dunked on, a lot of times, like if you're willing to take that and just swallow your pride, like you're gonna start blocking more than, and I'd rather have that on my team. So if you're a guy that's always gonna be in position, but this guy makes a spectacular one-handed catch,
of course,
like you can't be mad at this guy for doing that. And so when he left Dallas, that was kind of his reputation. He really kind of solidified himself as a top 15-ish corner going to Cincy, and then he cashes in to go to Tennessee. They're just hoping that they can just fill the void that they've had for so long. Darius Williams returns to the Rams from after a short stint in Jacksonville. He was on their Super Bowl team. Very solid, lengthy corner.
Yeah.
Reasonable $7 million.
Great play.
Annually.
Yeah, great pickup, I think.
So. Yeah, and then Sean Murphy-Bunting is another guy that we talked about. Tennessee can't get corner right, and Arizona is gambling that we can figure him out.
Well, yeah, Arizona has a pretty rough defense, secondary. Everybody on this list basically has a rough secondary for the most part.
Yeah.
Except for the Bears and Kansas City up there, but they're franchise tagged. I mean, you look at Detroit. The Colts re-signing isn't. They had a solid secondary, but the Eagles, Detroit, Tennessee, Arizona, all of them had bottom half secondaries.
Yeah, and it's hard to imagine many of them making massive differences. I think Darius Williams is probably the most likely of the bunch.
Right. Yeah.
But it just we'll see where it goes.
I think
it's a lot of meh.
So Meek Robertson's actually one of my favorite pickups this class because of the price. And watching him as a Raider, he is very good he's very versatile. He plays nickel and he plays outside. He sometimes walks into safety. So he's a very, chess piece like player. And I think that, Detroit, out of any team, that makes a lot of sense for them, is getting a guy that can kind of do a little bit of everything. They had that with CGJ, this last year. and now getting Amik, hopefully he can. That's probably the position he'll fit into. For Detroit, they still need to address more secondary help back there, but it's a good start.
Yeah, none of these situations should be solidified to the fullest, but they're stepping stones in the right direction. But yeah, let's wrap up this first wave of free agents. We'll talk about a lot of safeties because this is a strong class. Mm-hmm. First and foremost, like we said, Antoine Winfield, was franchise tagged. Still not to come together with a deal, but the vibes are that he's going to be re-signed without issue. And then there's a ton of guys that aren't breaking the bank. Really, Xavier McKinney was the true king of the class with the deal he got with Green Bay. They made a splash earlier with Josh Jacobs, Xavier McKinney's top 5 safety, top 6, 7 safety in football, and he came out the right time, and he was the one that truly got the big deal. And then a lot of other guys, it's really I'd say it's reasonable deals that just don't hurt your team.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we should talk about Chicago. Mm-hmm. They've got 2 guys on this list. They're going and getting Kevin Byard, Tennessee for a long time.
He was their one lone bright spot.
Yeah,
he was consistently leading the position in interceptions, and then they also pick up more help on the defensive side as well. So Jonathan Owens, like you said, was a really reasonable signing.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
So 2 year for 4.5 is very
well. He's a guy that doesn't play. He's a box safety more so than anything. He had 125 tackles 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. Getting that guy for $2.25 million a year, I'd take that all day. 84 tackles last year, but just consistently around the ball, and you're getting him for very minimal money, mm-hmm. which is really good. They've actually done a great job of doing that. Obviously, we just talked about Jalen Johnson. I think Kevin Byard, if he pans out for 1 year, you're really happy. They've got him on a 2-year deal. He's a little bit older, but hey, he's been there. He's done it. A vet in the secondary is great to have. So I think it's a great pickup.
Yeah. And I mean, Denver, obviously they released Justin Simmons, mm-hmm. who that was a well-liked move, but they bring in Brandon Jones, who has shown some spark.
Right.
But he hasn't been a true starting safety. He's kind of been more of a rotational piece. So that's kind of a little bit of a gamble because you're taking away one of the best safeties in football to have a project that hopefully can work out. But now there's 3 Longhorns potentially starting in that secondary next to Pat Surtain. So Caden Stearns, as with him as a tandem, it'll be interesting to see if they can kind of come into their own, because coming out, they were both expected to, be lights out at their position. Obviously, Caden Stearns was like a first-round caliber talent that fell all the way down. And then Brandon Jones was, a senior that just did all the right things, was durable, and we thought would be a still mid-round pick. Mm-hmm. And neither really lived up to that billing. So we'll see if they can do that. Kyle Duggar obviously is still a transition tag. He's got the restricted free agent vibe of somebody, or New England has the opportunity to match. Usually in those kinds of deals, they kind of stay put where they're at. Mm-hmm. Don't expect anything different there. And then we got a couple of guys that, like Jeremy Chin. That was one of the crazy rookie stories. I believe he was a second-round pick that was a linebacker safety kind of mm-hmm. hybrid, and he just has a nose for the football. Yeah. He's one because he's on Carolina. You kind of gloss over, but he's a big reason why, they, despite being 2-15, were one of the top.
Yeah, 4th defense in the league.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So he going to the Commanders on just a $5 million 1-year deal. I mean, they need all the help they can get in the secondary, so it makes sense. Next to Cameron Curl, and then Alohi Gilman. That was one of the ones right before we were recording. You're like, I don't even know who that is.
I don't.
And it's just like he kind of stepped in, and right next to Derwin James, who we think is one of the top 3 safeties in football, and he was the 7th graded safety in the NFL this year. Mm-hmm. Just kind of great in both around the pass. Did well, was durable, reasonable deal, $5 million. annually, like I said, for 2 years. Yeah, it was basically exactly what they thought they'd get out of Nasir Adderley, and he didn't pan out like we thought. So, reasonable deal as they're trying to reshape their defense because they still have a lot of moves to make. We talked about Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa. Probably 2 of the 4 of those have to go, and they have to make moves with the money that they have on those. So,
already moved off of other guys. Austin Eckler, of course, we talked about him earlier. He was a free agent, but they couldn't re-sign him. Kenneth Murray, free agent, couldn't re-sign him. So they're going to have to figure out some things. And I mean, this is a good starting place, especially if Gilman is as good as his grade was this last year. The other 2 on this list, I think that Geno Stone was a really good pickup for Cincinnati. Just a solid player, consistent guy, constantly doing the right things. And of course, playing. Now they're going to be playing a rival. It's a rival thing again. We got a bunch of these where you got the Saquon going to Philly. They're going to be playing the Giants twice a year. Well, now you got Geno Stone going to Cincinnati. Going to be playing Baltimore twice a year. So that's going to be a fun thing. There's a bunch of players actually that did that moving in conference.
In addition, Jordan Poyer, getting released by the Buffalo. He's the best safety of the duo that they released with Michael Hyde as well, and he goes to Miami, who lost a few safeties and DBs. So, it'd be a very interesting wave. One thing I want to point out as we wrap this up: 31 teams mentioned making improvements, and Dallas re-signed their long snapper. So it's they're all in.
Well, I didn't want to bring it up because I know that
I mean,
there's kids watching, but
I mean, here the deal is we're reacting to the first wave, and when you are a team that was one of the top 5-6 teams in football, and for 3 straight years are a 12-win team, those are the types of teams that need to have free agency to go over the top.
Right.
And when you don't make a single move, that is very telling. That seems intentional. More so than it is like, oh, yeah, we just can't afford it. Obviously, you don't have a lot of wiggle room. But there's not guys that are breaking the bank that you could have picked up and it would have worked out. Maybe they kind of scraped the barrel with the remaining free agents, but they had 5 starters in the last day and a half sign elsewhere. They haven't replaced a single one.
Right.
And that's the problem. It's not like whether it's the attempt or lack thereof that you're not getting better. So that's something that I would just want to bring up because that's really kind of irked me a little bit just because it's not even me about the team. It's just you're so close that you need the one move to try to get over the top. Philly had a disappointing year. And obviously, Bryce Huff is a high risk.
Right.
Because he's just basically a situational pass rusher. Saquon Barkley, probably not the best way to spend your assets when you have so much need on the back end.
Yeah, but defense. They're going for it.
They're going for it. Make a move. Do something. Like, you can't look at Derrick Henry getting $7.5 million annually and say, oh, that was too much. And then let Tony Pollard walk. That's fine. But Rico Dowdle's there. Your only running backs do spawn.
Yeah. That's it. Well, I guess so. If you're watching, Jerry, which you should be watching, Jerry,
yes.
Pay attention, and if you need any help, you just give us a call. I'll give you my number. But yeah, we definitely, Dallas, they let Tyron Smith walk. They let the center walk. Biatch. And
Dorrance Armstrong.
Yeah, Dorrance Armstrong.
Van Der Esch is retiring.
Yeah, so they're not getting better. It's all, and Tony Pollard's on. So, do something.
Yes.
Anything. Because I'm friends with a lot of Dallas fans. We're from, Texas, and no one is happy right now. No one I know is happy, and I don't know. I know that, y'all have y'all's ways, and y'all have done this a lot longer than us. But I'm pretty sure not making a single move in free agency isn't a way to win games.
Yes.
So, but yeah, so that's our last rant today.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up today. We'll do another episode to cover because obviously as the week progresses, we're going to have a lot more moves. We haven't had the huge blockbuster trade that just kind of came out of nowhere yet. I'm sure we'll cover over that. More signings, obviously, plenty of guys still out there that are waiting to be signed. There's probably guys that have been signed that we haven't really looked, haven't gotten any vibrations.
Josh Uche got $15 million over 2 years
for resign.
For resign for New England.
Yeah, so things are happening very quick pace. We just want to get over it. That's why it was as long as it was, because so many things happened.
Yeah,
it was a full-time job over the last day and a half, covering and making sure everything was being reported and stuff like that. But yeah, appreciate you guys sticking out with us for as long as you did. If you did, please go like, subscribe. Yeah. Follow us on all the socials. We're getting a lot more active on Twitter as breaking news is coming out. We want to start interacting with you guys and get your thoughts on some things.
Comment. Tell us who y'all's favorite player that got in free agency this year. There's some players that are coming up. You still have a lot of players that are in free agency. Trent Brown, Jonah Williams. We were talking about them before. Tell us who your favorite guy that you want to see go somewhere is. Just let us know what you're thinking. Like I said, I have tons of Dallas fans telling me exactly how they feel.
Yeah.
So we need other fans, though. We need other teams, so we kind of get a better feel of how y'all are feeling also.
Yeah. But yeah, I appreciate you guys once again. Look out for the next couple of videos we got going on. We just started our positional rankings for GTD. We're going to get on with that pretty soon. Continue that in addition to covering all the moves that are happening. We're moving at a fast pace, even though it's the offseason.
Yeah, all the live stuff will get out, but we're going to have, of course, draft stuff is coming, positional rankings, and then another draft at the end of this month. We're going to do some what would we do, some mock-to-mocks. So, yeah, a lot of stuff will be happening. Y'all just keep up and let us know if y'all want to see something, too, if we want to do something different than what we're doing. So we appreciate y'all. Y'all have a good one. And thank y'all again.
Yep, appreciate y'all.